Eric Ladd is the owner of L&K Real Estate in Big Sky and also the CEO of Outlaw Partners and publisher of EBS newspaper. He's in the middle of things in this small mountain town and has been for more than 20 years. Eric, it's nice to have you on the other side of an interview.
Yeah, good to be here, Joe. Let's see. I'm watching how you do here.
Yeah, well, thanks. Appreciate it. So, obviously, the COVID-19 pandemic has been devastating on a number of levels. As an owner of a real estate company, what went through your mind in late March when Big Sky began really seeing some of the effects?
Well, it goes back to my mentors in the real estate industry, what they taught me early on, like my grandfather and father taught me, and it's that real estate will cycle. And it's for things that you least expect on what will cause a real estate market to cycle. So when this first hit, we all sat back and wondered if this was going to be that next downturn or correction in the market, which will hit at some point in time. And it got quiet. As Anya said, there was a couple month pause there where everybody was taking, the time to basically reflect on what was going to happen. And then lo and behold, it didn't correct. It went quite the opposite. So, to answer your question, I think everybody, like I said, they sat back and took pause. But one of the nice things coming into this was that we did learn from the last recession, and people were really smart about how they not only were purchasing real estate, there was a lot more control on debt versus equity ratios on real estate, but also the developers came into this in a lot more healthy state. So for example, in Big Sky, our developers were flush coming into this. They were really smart about how they capitalized their projects. They were really in control of their own destiny, and there wasn't the banks that were controlling it. So because of that end result, and then also because of a lot of the points that Anya just touched on, people choosing to come west or east for that matter, and they've landed in places like this. So we took pause, and then we're pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, pleasantly surprised. I mean, certainly turned into a situation I don't think many people expected. I mean, there are quite a lot. It appears quite a lot of sales in Southwest Montana right now in the real estate market. When did you first realize that the market may not suffer as much as we feared it might?
We tend to trend 60 to 90 days behind more mature markets. And so what I mean by that is markets like a Bend, Oregon, for example, when we started seeing their uptick there, similar lifestyles, similar profiles to a buyer that would buy in Bozeman or Big Sky, or you go to a market like Telluride or Vail, once again, a little more mature than Big Sky, we tend to be a couple months behind them. So what we started to see is our counterparts in those markets started to report some pretty robust activity. We sensed that it was probably going to show up here, and it did. And it ended up being about 45 to 60 days behind when those markets really had their uptick. It started to show up here. Everybody's phones started ringing more. And then once our governor kind of properly, allowed for some travel to start occurring here, people started to show up in droves. And all you have to do is look around town and see the license plates now to see what's happened.
Yeah, it's quite the array of tourism going on, which is, great for the economy, the local economy, the Bozeman economy. Speaking of those, can you give some comparisons and contrast to the Big Sky market versus the Bozeman market?
Big Sky and Bozeman have always had kind of this brother-sister relationship, in my opinion. So when I first started real estate here, or when someone like Anya was starting out in this market, Big Sky was really, an afterthought in a way. I mean, it was just this little resort town that was starting up and no one really quite understood it. Or you could even talk to people in Bozeman who really did not understand the magnitude of the dream and the vision of what was about to happen here. Bozeman was, a much more mature standard market, great mountain town, but they had industry, and they had a university and an airport and things like that. So Bozeman, I would say in the early years, definitely had a little more stability, whereas Big Sky was a little bit more of the Wild West. Fast forward, Big Sky got this huge infusion of capital through a lot of the big investors that have come in and a lot of the big development groups. And now what you're starting to see is, I've always said, you're starting to see this joining of Big Sky and Bozeman where they're coming together. They estimate 3,000 workers a day come up from Bozeman to Big Sky to work. I mean, anybody could do the math on the impact that Big Sky development now has to Bozeman. vice versa, Bozeman's a huge supporting mechanism for Big Sky. A lot of the needs and services and industries and supplies and all that stuff is coming out of Bozeman. And now Bozeman's obviously starting to become a bigger hub for our housing because Big Sky pricing has gotten so high that a lot of people have been priced out of this market, and a lot of people are choosing to move to Big Sky or to Bozeman because of either prices or quality of life. You know, kind of a rambling answer to say that we are very connected, and we are connected at the hip. And what happens in Bozeman impacts Big Sky, and what happens in Big Sky impacts Bozeman. But I think this is going to be a long-standing relationship, and my prediction is this is only going to grow more and more together. I think, you know, people in Big Sky are starting to get more involved with the university. We sit on more people in Big Sky are sitting on boards like at the airport and other decision-making mechanisms that really impact us. So we are in this together.
Sure. Well, let me ask you, Eric, in 20 plus years of being in this real estate market, you know, what stands out to you the most right now?
You know, the old adage, if you build it, they will come. And I said this in my last update, you know, for 20 years, we've been talking about how Big Sky was going to we do all this arm waving of, we were going to eventually have a downtown, or we were going to have more restaurants or shops and such. And, you know, what happened is Big Sky was built in reverse of most mountain ski towns. Most mountain ski towns were built, they were a mining town or they were a small town before they became a resort. We built in reverse. Big Sky Resort launched on their own, independent, great vision. The Kircher family did a phenomenal job getting that up and going, but they did it kind of isolated on their own, Big Sky Resort. Then Blixeth came to town, huge pioneer, stepped out way out there ahead of his time and got Yellowstone Club up and going. And then the pools got Moonlight up and going, and Blixeth and the Dolans got Spanish Peaks up and going. And then the roller coasters that happened after that. But point being is that we never really had that heartbeat of a town before, you know, we had all this real estate developed. So billions of dollars in real estate have been built and sold in Big Sky before we even had a town. Well, now 20 years later, we're getting a town. And so you're starting to see a semblance of body heat, Main Street, shops, gathering points, that type of stuff happening. So probably one of the most, you know, standout points to me over the last 20 years is that we're finally becoming a town. And what I'm curious to see what happens is because we don't have leadership, we're not incorporated, is what's going to happen. We choose our own destiny here. Are we going to become a resort, or are we going to become a town? And that's where I think there's a lot of exciting opportunity for us to come together and get some semblance of vision of what we'd like this place to look like 20 years from now.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's interesting to see, or at least, you know, from my perspective, to ask the questions, who's calling the shots. And I think many people do have those questions. You know, let's switch over to kind of buyers and sellers. Where can a buyer still find value right now in the market?
You know, a buyer in today's market right now is land. If you can find a good piece of land, you will usually find that if you study the value of that land, comparison to going back as long as 2008, you're still buying at a relatively good value. For example, you can go up into markets like up in the Big Easy or the Gallatin Preserve, where we've got an amazing lot, 160 acres lots listed up called Royal Coachman on top of Big Easy. Those prices are below the peak in 07. So there is a great opportunity to find a piece of land, and it can be anywhere in Big Sky and do relatively well. And if you were to study the value of that land, and this can even be in markets like Spanish Peaks or Moonlight, and Anya's way more of an expert on those markets than I am, you could study the values of those markets and go against the Telluride or Jackson Hole, and you are doing very well on those purchase prices. So land is where I'm saying right now there's great value. I'm seeing a little bit of a pocket of value still at Spanish Peaks right now. I think Spanish Peaks is a little bit misunderstood of what that is to become. And they have a massive project called the Montage being built there right now. And when that opens, look out. It's going to be a game changer for Spanish Peaks. And I think you'll see a huge pop in value there. So I think the Spanish Peaks Mountain Club is another place to study for those that are interested in a private club experience. I think you could do very well there. We're all benefiting from the trickle down of Yellowstone Club right now. Yellowstone Club's nearing sellout, and the numbers there are astronomical. So I think everything is getting the what I call the YC lift as well. But land in Spanish Peaks is be my summary for value right now for buyers.
So yeah, so there's your advice for buyers, you know, keep an eye out for land. What about sellers? What do you got for them, advice wise?
You know, it's you are in a seller's market. If you have thought about selling, the time to sell is now. Get a good firm representing you. Do your data. Do your studies. Understand value. Don't get greedy. Don't try to price way ahead of this market right now. You have already recovered a tremendous amount of value in the last 3 years or even in the last 12 months. Price to market, move it quick, and you have done very well. We are in a real estate cycle, and Mike later on in this will be able to speak a little bit about cycles. Nobody knows when it's going to cycle down. It will. It is a guaranteed. Real estate will cycle. It's just at a certain point in time, prices outprice what buyers can afford. Stuff doesn't make sense. It doesn't pencil, and it will cycle. And you as a seller, if you've gotten greedy and waited too long, you can benefit, or you're going to have to ride through that next cycle. We are at a top somewhere. I'm not saying I'm predicting it's going to happen immediately, but we are near a top for sure. So sellers, be smart. Don't be greedy. Get a good firm representing you and move it.
Well, so you just talked about where we are. We're somewhere near the pinnacle. We're somewhere near the top. We don't know exactly. Maybe it's on the way up, on the way down. Who knows? What are the risks with this market right now?
I think the biggest market, or the biggest risk in any real estate market, is greed. And greed can roll over into a lot of different parts of the real estate market. That could be speculators getting way out over their skis. My dad used to say, and this is no disrespect to pilots, but he goes, when pilots start building spec homes, look out. That's when, when everybody thinks they're a builder and everybody can speculate on the real estate market, that's when you should start being scared. The other thing to start, looking for is when things just don't make sense. When people can't afford to put a business into a commercial space, that's a dangerous time. So I think those are things that everybody should be, aware of. And we all have a little bit of control over this. And this is where it's important, where landlords make sure that you give rates that tenants can afford. And people are selling and not being greedy. You're moving up incrementally in a real estate market. The banks have a lot more constraints on them now on lending. So we're protected on that side, where you don't get the goofy loans like of years past. So I think that, the word greed usually comes to mind when I get concerned about a real estate market. I'm not screaming fire right now. I think the fundamentals are very strong in the real estate market. People are buying with cash, and especially in Southwest Montana, it reminds me of a market like Boulder, Colorado. When you've got good quality of life and people buying for the right reasons, you tend not to get the big crashes that you would see in a big metropolitan market or somewhere like Las Vegas or Phoenix. So I'm not as concerned, but look out for greed and look out for pilots building spec homes.
Yeah, Boulder's quite a busy place these days. We do live in a ski community, and I'm just curious what your perspective is. How might Big Sky Resort affect the market this winter?
Well, they're the center of the universe. There's no doubt about it. The ski lifts spinning are a huge reason that people move here, but I think we've also matured beyond that. In past years, if you'd have asked me what would happen if the resort wouldn't open, I would say mass devastation across the board, every industry. Learning from COVID, what I've realized is we're getting depth to this community beyond the ski resort. Ski resort's critically important, no doubt. Everybody wants to go up and enjoy those powder ski runs in the wintertime. But people are now realizing it's a rounded out experience here. People move here because of quality of life, the rivers, the park, Bozeman, the university, the great airport. There's life beyond the ski resort now, and that starts to make me feel a little more bullish about the market because we have more fundamentals backing us than just the chairlifts.
Switching over just to some numbers here. You're talking. We're seeing what's going on in Big Sky, Bozeman, Southwest Montana. What is the volume of real estate transactions here? Since COVID-19 hit.
It's like catching a falling knife, trying to figure it out. Like Anya said, the stats questions are kind of tricky, but roughly speaking, in the last 90 days in Big Sky alone, we've done somewhere in the mid of $200 and some million worth of real estate transactions in the last 90 days. Now here's the catch point of that. Amongst that data, Yellowstone Club is not reporting on that. So non-disclosure state, meaning people don't have to record data into the MLS system. Yellowstone Club rumored to have done somewhere in the neighborhood of $500 to $700 million since COVID happened. So taking even the low end of that, if you're adding that to the data that is reported in MLS, you're nearing somewhere in the neighborhood of $700 million to $1 billion in real estate that's been transacted since, let's call it, COVID hit. If those numbers check out, which I feel pretty confident they do, you are dealing with one of the largest real estate booms in any resort town in the Rocky Mountains. It's a staggering number, and it's done very quietly because of how Montana records and publicizes data in the area.
Wow, that is a staggering number. Wow. Okay, so what does Big Sky look like 20 years from now?
Well, we get to choose our own destiny, as I said. And I will say one thing on that number, and this is an exciting thing for everyone to realize. The trickle-down effect of nearly $1 billion in real estate being transacted, they estimated somewhere in the neighborhood of a 3 to 4x multiple as it goes down into Gallatin County and Madison County, and all the jobs and businesses that spur out of that, and all the trades and moving companies. And you're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of $3 to $4 billion worth of impact in the trickle-down effect for these counties since COVID happened. So, it's going to happen. There's going to be a massive, boom effectively because of this. So pretty exciting that that's happening. I think, I'm sorry, Joe, what does it look like in 20 years? I hope Big Sky looks like the most cutting edge, well thought out, planned mountain town in the Rockies, because we had no excuse not to execute that. We got to come from ground up since the mid 70s. We didn't inherit a mess of a mining town with problems or whatever. We got to create it all from ground up. And resources and money aren't an issue. It's frankly just been vision, leadership, and organization amongst the community. And we've done a pretty good job because we are on our own. I mean, we don't have that formal leadership. So I hope the community continues to come together. It's going to require some bigger vision in terms of some of the nonprofits and the developers coming together to make some hard decisions in the next 10 years in regards to things like conservation and some of the important businesses that we want to have here, how the school's going to look, how some of the public services are going to operate. But I hope that, we all come together and we get these things organized now so we can be really proud of something when we look back 20 years from now. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, we've seen it before, right? There's a number of ski resorts that are older than we are some have maybe done it right, some maybe haven't, but I think, it seems like the onus is on us. Well, look, Eric, thank you. Really appreciate taking the time. Some good insight there. Brandon, do you have any follow-up questions or any audience questions?
And hi, Eric, how's it going? I have a great audience follow-up to Joe's 20-year down the road question. This one comes from Janelle. Eric, do you think our community is ready to take another look at incorporation?
We had a spirited debate at dinner the other night with a bunch of folks about this, and I'm going to put her on the spot because Anya was included in this dinner conversation. And I think it was about this topic. And Janelle, I think we do, but I kind of feel like we've grown beyond the word of incorporation. Incorporation to me is like an easy point on a map to point to try to solve this unknown problem of feeling like we don't have representation or voice or thoughtful leadership to lead the area. And so I feel like while incorporation could work, and I feel that conversation should be ongoing, I almost feel like we need to figure out a more evolved way to come together as a community where stakeholders, being people that live here, feel like they've got representation, and there's some accountability, that there's someone that wakes up every day that they are paid to think about the best interest of this community. And it can't be the developers, and it can't be the Chamber of Commerce, and it can't be people that are volunteers on these boards. All those people are important, but there needs to be a person or persons who wake up every day and they're paid to look after your best interest and everyone else's best interests. And before we do that, we have to agree as a community, what's our vision? Like, where do we want to go? do we just want to try to build this thing out and make the most money as ever? Or do we want to be known for conservation? Or do we want to be known for thoughtful arts and culture? All those important buzzwords need to first be identified, and then there needs to be thoughtful leadership to execute the plan. Maybe it's incorporation, or maybe it's some sort of other structure that we create that we can do faster than trying to incorporate. But we do need leadership.
Yeah, that's a great thought. Anya, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, I'm in sync with Eric in the sense that we do, the thoughtful leadership piece is a really important one, and how to integrate all those community aspects that include the education, the arts, conservation, sustainability, and having somebody wake up every day. But just to part of that conversation that Eric mentioned was around the fact at how quickly Big Sky was able to mobilize when COVID happened in our community, and when all the resorts shut down and employees were let go, and how the various organizations, how the various nonprofits, and really how the community, the individuals within this community and the businesses got up, stood up, and really worked together to get the J1s home, to make sure that people that were unemployed were receiving funding, to help the nonprofits that were struggling all of a sudden. So really, I was incredibly proud. I sat Tatum on a Zoom call. No, I was incredibly proud. Sorry about that. I was incredibly proud of how well our community came together in that moment and how quickly we were able to do that. And I think that was because we were not incorporated. So to me, always wanting to have thoughtful leadership, but recognizing that we were able to act swiftly because we didn't have to jump through a lot of the different hoops that other cities would have had to jump through.
Yeah, well, thank you both for your input on that question.
Yeah, and Brandon, if I could just add one more thing to Janelle's great question, because this is a hot topic in Big Sky and it's only going to become hotter, is that I like to look at it as a Mad Lib, is that Big Sky is known for blank. And that's us to still figure out as a community. When someone thinks of Jackson Hole, a lot of times they think of those elk antlers in the square and that amazing park that they set up for the elk refuge next to town. It was amazingly thoughtful that they did that. It was aggressive during its time, and now it's stood the test of time and has driven value in that area. You think of Park City, it's known for arts. It's known for their incredible film festival. What do we want to become known for? We can't just become known for gated private ski resorts. That's fine. It's great, and they're amazing. They're world class, but that's not the soul that I think everybody's searching for and trying to create our identity here. And that's our opportunity. Our community, since I've lived here, has, I think, funded 3 different studies where these outside people have come in and helped create these binders about 8 inches thick of what they think Big Sky's DNA is. And they're sitting on a shelf somewhere in somebody's office. I think we need to go dust those off. We need to reestablish what those words are, and then we need to execute and find out who's going to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is, like you said, a matter of determining who we want to be. Thank you again, Eric. That was great input, and thank you for joining us tonight.